R. Kelly verdict. When is the singer's sentence hearing? R. Kelly is facing a life sentence after he was found guilty of several charges, including racketeering and sexual trafficking. The R&B singer has faced many accusations and criminal charges throughout his career, but now looks set to face an extended length of time in jail. He is currently awaiting sentencing. At the end of a 6-week trial in Brooklyn, the jury deliberated for 2 days before returning a guilty verdict on all 9 counts brought against the 54-year-old musician. Kelly's lawyer Deborah O'Connor has announced his intention to appeal the verdict. What was the R. Kelly verdict? On September 27, 2021, Robert Sylvester Kelly was found guilty on all 9 charges brought against him. He was accused of running a Chicago-based criminal organization that recruited women and children and subjected them to unwanted sex and mental torment. After the release of the 2019 documentary Surviving R. Kelly, he was arrested on charges of racketeering and for violating the Mann Act. The Mann Act prohibits the transportation of women or girls for the purpose of prostitution or debauchery. He was found guilty of racketeering, sexual exploitation of a child, bribery, kidnapping, and sex trafficking involving 5 victims. 14 alleged acts were associated with the racketeering charge, and the jury found that the government had proved 12 of those acts. One of the victims included the late singer Aaliyah, whom Kelly illegally married when she was 15 years old in 1994. Kelly also faces outstanding criminal charges for aggravated criminal sexual abuse involving 4 victims, 3 of which are minors in Illinois, as well as engaging in prostitution with a minor in Minnesota. What sentence does R. Kelly face? After being found guilty on all 9 counts brought against him, Kelly now faces a life sentence in prison. Gloria Allred, a lawyer for some of Kelly's victims, said that of all of the predators she's gone after, Mr. Kelly is the worst. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York said in its Monday news release that Kelly will face a mandatory minimum of 10 years in prison and could face life behind bars. When is R. Kelly's sentence hearing? Kelly will face sentencing for his crimes on May 4, 2022. Until then, the judge ordered that Kelly remain in custody until he receives his sentence. If Kelly's lawyers appeal against the verdicts, it's possible that this date could move depending on the outcome of that. Which prison will R. Kelly go to? Kelly was initially arrested and kept within the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Chicago before being moved to the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn in June 2021 as he faced trial in New York. It is not yet clear which prison he will be transferred to after he is sentenced in May 2022.
Does it release any of the weight on you that this has been recognised in a court of law and he will serve time, possibly the rest of his life in prison?
In a way it does, and in a way it doesn't. Like I said, it's great that we've taken a step forward, but it's what happens outside of the courtroom. It is most important that women are supported to even feel like that they have the strength to come forward and tell their stories. If there's still victim shaming, victim blaming, and women being afraid to even speak their truth, we can never get to a court system where justice can be served. So we have to start there first, where when women, children, and even men, because they can be victims of domestic violence, feel supported by society to come forward and tell their stories, that's when justice is really going to.
Yeah, and we see it still, like with Drake. He came out with his album and gave credit to R. Kelly. So like our culture still doesn't understand that you can, or I guess they're trying to say that you can separate the artist from the person. And so my thing is that the artist and the person R. Kelly is, how many ever people he is, how many ever you want to categorize him as, he did this act. So you can't really separate that to me, because he wrote about it in his lyrics. If he didn't write about it, then you could say, okay, you can separate it. But I honestly feel like, you can't separate him from his music. And the fact that he's the king and of R&B and everything like that, like, that doesn't matter when it comes to Black women and Black men being violated. It doesn't matter to me. You were never a king. We gave you that title and we're taking it back. Well, I have like a ball of emotions that, came over me when the verdict, the guilty verdict came across. And that was because, these women, survivors that came forward, and so I'm just so happy to see them receive the justice that they, have been seeking for all these years.
It's one thing to do it in front of a camera, It's another when you have to look into the eyes of your abuser. And so for a lot of our survivors, we were absolutely thinking of them the entire time, knowing how difficult it would be. For some of these survivors, this was nearly a 30-year journey to be heard. So a lot of time has gone by, and so finally, I think a lot of them are feeling that the justice system now is hearing them too.
Well, I think it's a victory for all Black women who haven't been able to even come forward outside of like R. Kelly. Like they've just been in these situations where they couldn't come forward because of their race, and their culture, because we're often taught like, don't speak out about it, keep it private, that sort of thing. So I think it's a victory in and of itself, because, you know, me being a Black woman and having a daughter as well, I'm looking at like these women, they spoke out. And so they're saving my daughter and our future daughters and sons, you know, because there were men that were part of the trial as well.
I know the names of 48 women whose lives Kelly has ruined. 48 women can't be lying.
R. Kelly would come to some basketball games. I would see him in the stands. It almost seemed like a doting father when R. Kelly would see her.
It was just strange for me to see a grown man hanging out at a high school with high school girls.
Like you hear things, but to see it visually, and for her to be so young, it me up. It really, like, it's over with, but it still haunts me, you know? And I hate this that it happened. It shouldn't have happened. I should have never introduced her to him. I should have never introduced my family to him. How dare you? How dare you?
Today's guilty verdict forever brands R. Kelly as a predator who used his fame and fortune to prey on the young, the vulnerable, and the voiceless for his own sexual gratification. A predator who used his inner circle to ensnare underage girls and young men and women for decades in a sordid web of sex abuse, exploitation, and humiliation. To the victims in this case, your voices were heard, and justice, this conviction would not have been possible without the bravery and resilience of R. Kelly's victims. I applaud their courage in revealing in open court the painful, intimate, and horrific details of their lives with him. No one deserves what they experienced at his hands or the threats and harassment they faced in telling the truth about what happened to them. We hope that today's verdict brings some measure of comfort and closure to the victims.